Good morning, America. Morning glory. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Play a little Hunter Biden music. The sun's coming up at the White House today, and Hunter's looking out of his taxpayer-provided bedroom and saying, recovery's pretty good. I'm sober, and good for him. Hope he is. And I don't have to go to jail, and I'll sell a couple of paintings and pay the fine. And I can't go anywhere that my dad isn't. So I'm stuck living in the White House for 2 years. Yeah, it's a joke. I know you know it's a joke, and there's not much to say about it. The only thing that could redeem it is that David Weiss, the U.S. attorney who has proposed the plea deal to the federal judge, put out a statement, quote, "The investigation is ongoing." His spokesperson refused additional comment from Delaware. The number of stories on this: Hunter Biden reaches deal to plead guilty in gun tax case. Republicans rail at sweetheart deal as Hunter Biden pleads guilty. Hunter Biden's messy path to a plea deal. Republicans claiming double standard, vow to keep investigating Biden. The deal likely resolves Hunter Biden's federal investigation without prison time. Republicans claiming a double standard, vow to keep investigating Biden. Who is David Weiss, the Trump appointee who led the investigation? The outcome focused attention on whether Hunter Biden gets a better deal than the average person would get. Hunter Biden to plead guilty on misdemeanor tax charge. All right. It is what it is. Hunter Biden is an addict who got a lot of money from somewhere, didn't declare his income, owed a lot of money, and bought a gun and lied on a federal gun registration. Two big questions here. Would anyone under other circumstances with the same crime and the same plea get the same proposed no prison time? And there are a lot of people out there saying, no. I went to jail. My son went to jail. My daughter went to jail. My client is in jail. And they did far less than this. But Hunter Biden is, he's free as a bird. And what you think about that depends a lot upon what you think about politics. We will wait and see. Other shoes will drop. In fact, I'll put this also on the grand old pod, but Bill Barr was on Fox News yesterday talking about this, and the former Attorney General is just on point, cut number 17.
Well, I think the indictment of President Trump, which was a grave, significant act, really demands that the department assure everybody that the investigations into the Bidens was thorough, and that the final decisions reached were reasonable. And I agree with Jonathan Turley. It's not looking that good. The key question, as you say, is this just the end of the gun and the tax case, or is this the end of the whole shebang, all the other things that were swirling around that the press reported on, alleged bribery, alleged money laundering, and influence peddling, and even allegations by whistleblowers of internal hanky-panky in the investigation. This demands a thorough accounting. And so I don't think the department can do what its normal act would be here, or normal posture would be, which is to say nothing. I think the public interest demands that they assure people of the integrity of this investigation and the fairness of the final decision. And they have a good opportunity to do that with Chairman Comer's committee. If everything is hunky-dory, then I think they have to lean forward and look at that as an opportunity to clear the air and show that this was a thorough and fair investigation.
No, they're not going to do that, because I doubt it's a thorough and fair investigation. I just don't. I'm skeptical. Count me skeptical. And I just think people who are in jail right now for the same thing are outraged. Kevin McCarthy spoke for all Republicans yesterday when the speaker came out to a gaggle and said this, cut number 3.
My first reaction is it continues to show the two-tier system in America. If you are the president's leading political opponent, the DOJ tries to literally put you in jail and give you prison time. If you are the president's son, you get a sweetheart deal. Now, this does nothing to our investigation. It actually should enhance our investigations, because the DOJ should not be able to withhold any information now, saying that because of pending investigation, they should be able to provide Chairman Comer with any information that he requires.
All right, now what's interesting is the U.S. attorney who brought this proposed plea deal forward yesterday said the investigation is ongoing. Is that an attempt to keep Congress at bay? I don't know. Nobody knows. It just stinks, right? It just stinks. Everybody knows it stinks because it took so long. And thank goodness this story was not broken in the New York Post, or it would have been banished to the outlying world. Tim Scott had a great comment on this. I'll replay this in the grand old pod later today. Cut number 8, Tim Scott.
It's dangerous. Let me just say, we all know this, that the big guy has some explaining to do, without any question. Sean, we cannot be the city on the hill if we are not first a nation of law and justice. We can't be the city on the hill. We cannot fulfill our destination, our destiny as America if we do not have the Lady of Justice wearing a blindfold. We all have to be treated equally under the eyes and the laws of our country. And when the Bidens get away with that, we need to thank God for Senator Grassley and Congressman Comer for doing their jobs. But I can tell you, if they can't finish their investigation, President Tim Scott will finish it.
That's a great, he was on with Sean Hannity at Town Hall last night. Tim Scott really beginning to resonate with a bunch of people as an alternative, although Ron DeSantis remains firmly in second place. And I saw some closing in the numbers. People might be tired. I'm going to play, people might be tired of former President Trump. I think there might be some Trump fatigue with the lawsuit setting in. It's always a burden to carry an indictment. He sat down with Bret Baier on Monday night. I played a lot of that yesterday. I'm going to play more of it. The second part aired last night on Special Report. I'm going to play parts of that in the grand old pod today after the show, available only if you're a subscriber to the Universe. Of the hundreds of responses I got from the thousands of Universe subscribers, nobody's opinion changed about Trump. Very few people changed their opinion about Trump. And these are across the board. The Universians range from hardcore, always Trumpers, to never Trumpers, right? But they are vocal and smart, and they are all over the map, but they are where they were before the indictment of the former president came down 2 weeks and 3 days ago. And I'll go down to D.C. today, and I'll hear the same chatter about people saying the same thing. Nothing's going to change until we have debates. The ice is frozen, and then the ice, but the wearing away is steady. The pressure builds on Trump supporters to rethink or redouble their bets on Donald Trump, and that's it. Let me go to a couple of other bits of news. Everybody is praying for the 5 people in the submersible. Rescuers searching for it, according to the Telegraph this morning, have relocated to explore the source of sounds picked up by a Canadian P-3 subchaser, an analysis by United States Navy experts. So they're moving their remote vehicles to go and try and find the submersible sub with 5 people. They're running out of oxygen. I think today's the last day, so we'll keep you posted on that. 4 Israelis were killed in a terrorist attack yesterday. 4 were gunned down by Hamas terrorists at a West Bank gas station. 3 people were convicted of harassing a family on behalf of Chinese Communist government yesterday. 3 men convicted in Brooklyn federal court on Tuesday of stalking a family in New Jersey suburbs on behalf of the Chinese government. All right, so the CCP spies, the Chi-Coms, as we call them from the old days, are out trying to intimidate Americans of Chinese birth, Americans with Chinese family, or Chinese who are in the United States on green cards. And we're following that. The Washington Post had a fabulous story yesterday by Beth Reinhardt and Josh Dawsey, which I call a campaign ad tongue-in-cheek. Governor DeSantis used secretive panel to flip state Supreme Court. I mean, they really thought this was going to hurt Governor DeSantis, I think. But in fact, this is a love letter to Governor DeSantis from people who care about courts like me, because he flipped the Supreme Court from a 4-3 liberal court to a 6-1 conservative court in 4 years. And the details are there. Coming up after the break, I'm going to start my Jay Bhattacharya interview, which I did yesterday. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, probably the calmest, most persuasive, consistent critic of everything COVID that we did, and the smartest, MD, PhD, Stanford, head of their Center of the Economy and Demographics. Smart guy. I spent 80 minutes with him after the show yesterday to to talk with him about where we are after COVID. New statistics in the Wall Street Journal this morning on the devastation to America's test scores among 13-year-olds. I talked COVID with Dr. J for 80 minutes yesterday. I'm going to play a few segments of that on today's program. I encourage you to go and find the iTunes pod. And the whole video and audio are already posted at hughhewitt.com, where you can also subscribe for my newsletter. Stay tuned. I'll be right back. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The Age of Aquarius has got nothing to do with my guest, Mary Katharine Ham, co-host of Getting Hammered, the podcast that entertains and amazes many of you every single morning. Good morning, Mary Katharine. How are you?
I'm doing good, Hugh. Good to see you.
Do you even know what the fifth dimension are? Did your parents play the fifth dimension when you were a toddler?
No.
No. It's a total music vacuum that's in there, right? You just...
No, that's interesting because the Age of Aquarius. I know that. The reason I know that song is from the Hair soundtrack, which I was a great student of.
There's a way in. Last night that was playing in a restaurant, and now it's an earwig because it was on the air when I was 12 or 13. I'm wondering, what is the soundtrack of Mary Katharine Ham, Millennial Extraordinaire's life? What's in there?
Well, it's interesting because as a child, my dad gave me a very solid foundation of boomer classics. So I went from like very old school Hank Williams country all the way through the 60s and 70s, Donovan, the Beatles. And so I feel like I have a very solid foundation. However, I have educated my children beyond that about Sir Mix-a-Lot, LL Cool J, these kinds of things that from my childhood, the classics of my era.
Are you a Justin Timberlake person?
I do like Justin Timberlake. His first solo album, Justified, really one of the most surprising albums of my lifetime. It was widely acclaimed by everyone who expected it to be a dud because he was just this boy band guy, but he wasn't just this boy band guy. He was good.
Have you and Vic Mattis done your playlist podcast yet over at Getting Hammered?
We have not. And, Dwayne has been requesting for, I would say, a decade now that I come to him and do a playlist podcast, and I have not yet done it. Sorry about that. You
need to do that. All right, I have two serious questions for you. First, I am in the middle of an interview with Dr. J. Bhattacharya, which I conducted yesterday, 80 minutes. It's over at my podcast. It's on my website, the video of it. What do you think of Dr. J?
I think he's a smart guy, and I appreciate anybody who cut against the mainstream sort of talking points and, in fact, bullying when it came to COVID. And I know we're having this whole discussion about whether scientists are going to leave Twitter because people like Peter Hotez are being allegedly bullied by people who disagree with them. But the thing is that kind of figure is untrustworthy because he didn't tell the truth to people, right? They didn't actually weigh the data when we needed them to. And instead they decided to bully people. And that is why people now don't trust them. And no one ever deals with the original sin of the trust crisis when it came to COVID. And that's a big one.
That's what
Dr. J, someone I actually trust.
That's what I spent most of the time talking with him about, is how do you rebuild the public health system trust? And it's an 80-minute conversation. I'm not going to summarize it. But I do believe that if a Republican wins, we're going to see Dr. J. Bhattacharya running NIH, CDC, or perhaps HHS. I really do believe that. And I think that would be a first step towards getting people to listen again, because he was an elegant, polite dissenter, and he put up with a lot of grief. Now, Mary Katharine, Hunter Biden, I have to ask you, what's your reaction? Now, he's an addict. I understand that. I know his family cares for him, but what do you think about this?
Look, I'm concerned not just with the taxes that he didn't pay or the gun charge. These things, I wonder whether I would get away with them and just get a plea deal. I do wonder that. What's also important to me is where the millions were coming from that he was not paying the taxes on. Meanwhile, I do think, despite the fact that he obviously has personal troubles, it is fine to be concerned that he's not only having problems himself, but he's traveling with the president. He's very close with the White House. He was staying at the place with the Corvette with classified documents. Like, it's okay to wonder whether this person being around and close and what he has access to might be a liability. In addition, he's not just doing the things to himself. He went to court this week to further his mission to disown this child that is biologically his, and to have his child support payments lowered so that he doesn't have to support her as much as he did in the past when he was making these millions of dollars from where we don't know. And so, no, I don't decline to criticize someone like that who is connected to power, who is doing a lot of bad things in a lot of areas. I think it's fair to have that discussion, and I wonder if he's being treated with kid gloves. And I think that's a fair thing to wonder.
Bill Barr said last night he expects Merrick Garland to make a defense of this. Do you? I don't. I don't think Merrick Garland is going to. Merrick Garland is going to be rarer than the groundhog in Patuxent.
I think it's wiser to stay with his mouth shut. I'd prefer he did the Trump version of this and just go out and talk about it everywhere and try to defend it. But I don't think he'll do that.
Are you going to be talking about this on Getting Hammered, Mary Katharine?
Yes, we are. The episode is out today. The news did us a favor by breaking before we recorded, so we can talk about Hunter Biden. Check it out.
Oh, Getting Hammered, Vic Mattis and Mary Katharine Ham talking Hunter Biden to your heart's content. Go and get that. Mary Katharine, have a great week. I'll be right back, America. Welcome back, America. If Olivia Beavers of Politico knows anything about the fifth dimension, I will fall over in my chair. Olivia Beaver joined me from Politico. Good morning, Olivia. Do you know anything about the fifth dimension?
Was it a song back in the day?
It was a group. I knew it. Thank goodness I don't have to fall out of my chair. Olivia is one of my favorite guests because A, her lighting is perfect. B, she's always happy. And she sends me notes before an interview about what she's working on, which makes it actually fabulous for the host. Olivia, I am fascinated by this source close to the House oversight investigation who is chatting with you. Explain to the audience what you picked up about Hunter Biden.
Yes, Hugh. So essentially, the Hunter Biden news that broke yesterday, my colleague reported that essentially their charges against him are intended to be a comprehensive resolution to his potential legal liability in all matters investigated by federal authorities, which means they're done looking at his business with foreign entities. But that is definitely not true with House Republicans who say, we think that there's still something here. We're going to keep pushing forward. James Comer went into the House SCIF. It's a secure location and basically reviewed a doc that the FBI was providing. And he emerged quite unhappy, basically saying there were too many redactions. Some of the information that he wanted to see, some underlying documents weren't there. And so I'm told that he basically had a phone call with Jim Jordan, and they were trying to discuss ways forward. They're still debating whether to hold FBI Director Chris Wray in contempt, unless he can sort of appease them with these document requests. But they are also looking to bring in Weiss, who, if you remember, is that Trump attorney who was looking into Hunter Biden. And I guess that they want to be drilling into him about why he did decide to not look more into the foreign business dealings. And there's also something else. They are looking to bring in Devon Archer, and I think we're going to be seeing him within the next 7 to 10 days, the source tells me. And Archer was a close business associate of Hunter Biden. So they're going to probably be drilling into him about any, relation that Hunter Biden might have with Burisma and the money that he got there.
Yeah, no, Olivia, yesterday, U.S. Attorney Weiss said the investigation is ongoing. That was a printed statement. Kyle Cheney, your colleague, has reported this was intended to be a four corners deal to wrap up all of Hunter Biden's liability. It is possible that both those things are true in that Hunter Biden's plea is contingent upon cooperation in matters concerning people like Devon Archer. Have you heard if House oversight has been warned off from these hearings by the DOJ as improvidently held because they'll interfere with the prosecution, or are they full speed ahead in the House?
They're full speed ahead as far as I know, but they might still get that warning. I know that James Comer now is going to be pushing the FBI and DOJ to be clear what documents relate to ongoing investigations, because that was sort of what they kept running into. They wanted a document and they would get the pushback from the government saying, this is part of, it's not classified, but it's part of an ongoing investigation. So it's redacted for whatever reasons. And he was feeling frustrated, being like, well, what ongoing investigations are there then? If you've already made charges, I should be able to see the underlying evidence related to this. So I think you're going to start seeing a whole new approach to their fight between House Republicans and the DOJ in terms of what documents they can get on Hunter Biden too.
When do they bring in Hunter Biden?
That's a good question. I know that they want to. I don't know when.
When do they bring in Jim Biden?
Man, you're killing me with these questions.
Well, I mean, this is, to me, the obvious thing is Devin Archer, Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and then you've got the investigation where you want it. Who's the guy, Bobolaski? They got to bring him in. Has he already been in?
My understanding is not, but I think that they're all sort of building up to that point. You build up the evidence pool, and Comer is still working to try to connect. He hasn't publicly produced evidence to suggest that the president was involved in the bribery allegations that are out there.
No, he hasn't. He hasn't.
Yeah.
I do know. I'm going to open up the phone. Nikki Haley's got laryngitis, so I was going to talk to Nikki Haley next hour. She can't talk. So I'm going to open up the phones and ask the public what they think about this. What is the general reaction? We have a minute, Olivia. Just generally around the Politico newsroom to the Hunter Biden deal.
I think that there's long been believed. If you looked at the gun form with him checking the box that he hadn't been charged with a federal crime, everyone could see that one was coming from a long ways away. I think that there's long sort of been seen that the stuff that Hunter Biden was in is fishy. So I don't know that there was a ton of surprise that resulted in a charge. But I think you're dealing, and I'll say it quickly, right now we're looking at the Donald Trump charges. We're looking at the Hunter Biden charges and questions about how the justice system works or doesn't work, or if it's fair and how it's applied. And I think that that's sort of the broader debate that reporters are also interested in is, what did Hunter Biden get off easy? Did Donald Trump, was he treated fairly?
I'm interested in other defendants who face the same set of charges who went to prison. They're the people I'm interested in, and I think we're going to hear from them in the days and weeks ahead. Olivia_Beavers, that's where you follow her on Twitter. You read her at Politico. It's always joy to see you in the morning, Olivia. Thank you for joining me as always. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for tuning in. This is a two birds with one stone couple of segments. You often hear me say this is late Roman Republic stuff, and I'm hoping that you have muscle memory back to my long series on Plutarch and Tacitus with Dr. Larry Arnn, or my various conversations with people about Roman history when I say late Roman Republic stuff. But I also like in the summer, on the first day of summer, to introduce you to a new author. And one of my favorite reads is a fellow by the name of Robert Harris, who's never been on the show before. Now, you might have met Vince Flynn for the first time on this show, or Ken Follett, or Bernard Cornwell. Robert, welcome. It is good to see you. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Hi, very good to see you too, Hugh.
Now, you're a Cambridge man, and I think like William Dalrymple and Ken Follett, you're a man of the left. Am I right about that?
Yeah. Broadly speaking, they're my sympathies, yes.
No, that's fine. We're not talking politics today. We're talking about the late Roman Republic. I want people to read the Cicero trilogy so they'll understand. Even people who will not sit down with a history book will read a great novel. And the Cicero trilogy is what I want to talk to you about today. Has it got legs? Do people keep reading it? Like, I just discovered it fairly recently. I read Fatherland like 15, 20 years ago, but I didn't know about your Cicero trilogy. How does that do?
It does pretty well. It's just come out a year or so ago in the UK in a single volume, which so it's a big book, over 1,000 pages when it's all together, because there are three novels. And that's the same in Italy and in Holland. One of the problems in the States with the Cicero trilogy is that two volumes were published by Simon & Schuster and a third volume by Knopf. So it's sort of a bit split, but it's still out there. The novels can be read on their own, but it's best to read them in sequence. It begins with Imperium, and then Conspirata, and then Dictator. And it traces, volume 1 is the rise of Cicero, volume 2 is Cicero in power, and volume 3 is Cicero's fall from power and the familiar story of the assassination of Julius Caesar and all that.
Well, I thought it was fabulous. By the way, whoever reads, it's very tricky. If you're an audiobook enthusiast, as I am, it's very tricky to find all three because they switch. Not only do they switch publishers, they switch audio producers for the third book, but the narration is fabulous and the books are fabulous. And I don't give that compliment out very often because I'm kind of serious about Roman history. I read the real thing as well as the adapted novels like yours and before yours, Colleen McCullough. But a lot of people won't do the hard work, especially as they get older, but they'll read a good novel. And this introduces them to what the phrase late Roman Republic means. Now, Robert Harris, when you hear me say that what's going on in the United States today is late Roman Republic stuff, what does that mean to you, given that you actually know your late Roman Republic stuff?
What it means to me is that you can't take for granted an ancient form of democracy, that it's constantly under attack. The Romans had a form of democracy. Okay, women couldn't vote. It was biased in favor of the rich and so on. But still, it was an astonishing form of democracy with annual elections. And they'd had it for centuries, longer actually than America has existed. And a supposition of people like Cicero was that it would always exist. And in 25 years, the whole thing collapsed. And so for me, the novels have a kind of parallel with democracy, not just in the United States, but all across the world. That is, that it's not the natural state of men and women to live in democracies, actually. And they can easily be overtaken. And there are many parallels in what happened to the ancient Roman Republic with what we see going on today.
I agree with this, and I don't want to be facile. I want to say that I think democracy is very sturdy. The Constitution is a very, very reliable document. The British Constitution continues to function quite well. But over the course of 25 years, if you abandon the custom and the self-restraint upon which democracy is based, you end up with not just the Gracchi, but you end up with the first triumvirs and the second triumvirs. And poor people like Cicero stand in the middle trying to get people to pretend the rule of law matters, and it all collapses around them. So what alarms you the most in the current setting that makes you... let me ask this. Who strikes you as a Cicero-like figure on either side of the Atlantic right now?
Hard to see anyone with that degree of intelligence. Cicero was a cunning and practical politician at the same time as being a philosopher and a brilliant orator. Such people we don't seem to see in politics anymore. And they were becoming rare in the Roman Republic, which was filled with a lot of pretty inadequate people who were running the show by the time you got to around kind of 50, 60 BC. So I think that the fundamental thing is that the Roman constitution was designed for a relatively small power, a citizen's kind of state, really, a city-state, and that it became a huge empire, and it had standing armies, and it had a huge military infrastructure. And this kind of buckled the power system. People could become enormously rich. Pompey had the whole of the Eastern Mediterranean really financing him, Pompey the Great, and Julius Caesar had the whole of France, Gaul as it was then called, supporting him. So these were two immensely wealthy men, and they really bought elections. And the whole political process became mired in litigation for months, sometimes years. Consuls who were elected annually, two of them at any one time to run the country, they couldn't take office because there was so much legal stuff going on. And the other thing is that people no longer agreed what the Republic was for. And I think that that's one of the things that I find most striking now. There was no consensus as to why exactly this institution existed. What was the function of the country and the Republic? What was it supposed to do? And that was lost. So therefore people just were willing to do anything for their side to win. There was no consensus of preserving the state.
That's it. No limit on what you will do to win. Now, I wrote a column for the Washington Post not long ago. I don't know if it ever showed up on your Google search, in which I mentioned the your Cicero trilogy, as I'm not really worried about a late Roman Republic resort to violence because we haven't got standing armies running around behind Sulla, and Caesar's not going to come back from Gaul with a few legions behind him to cross the Rubicon. But these massive concentrations of wealth are real. And they do have a parallel with the massive concentrations of wealth that Pompey and Crassus and others accumulated prior to that. The deployment of the wealth now doesn't build armies, it builds online presences. Has that occurred to you that that's the parallel that we have to worry about?
Yes, definitely. I'm afraid that I agree with you. The really what brought down the Roman Republic was unscrupulous billionaires who posed as being anti-establishment and whipped up the masses to, in fact, literally storm the Capitol in ancient Roman Republican times. And there was a constant process of belittling every institution so that everybody lost faith in the Senate. They thought, the Senate was just corrupt. And so they were licensed to burn it down, which is what they literally did. And so there was this constant underlying uneasiness and a kind of demagoguery. And in the end, nothing can withstand this. I'm also very...
Yeah, Robert Harris, it's been 50 years since I did my declining of Latin tenses, so I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce mos maiorum correctly. But would you explain to the audience what the mos maiorum is? Because I believe that's fracturing in the United States. We have one. People don't know it. The Brits have one. You know it. What is a mos maiorum for any country, and what did it mean in Rome?
Well, I think you better remind me of exactly what that means for you, because I'm not altogether sure myself.
The traditions and customs that one does, like the courses of honors that you would run. You used to do things in order, and you couldn't become a consul till you were 42, I think. But then one by one, the old rules fell. Rules that had endured for a couple of hundred years fell by the wayside one by one. And I see in the United States, right now we're talking about expanding the Supreme Court. That has not changed in 130 years. That would be a disaster if we expanded the number of justices on the Supreme Court, in my view. But it would be just another step away from our mos maiorum, tradition.
Yeah, no, I understand what you mean. And yes, you're right. They started to give special sweeping powers to consuls and to military commands, which were supposed to be time limited. They ceased to do that. They started to bend the rules. The other point I was going to make is that the increasingly power passed into the hands of the mob, who could occupy the Senate, who could, howl down people they disliked, a kind of lynch mob mentality. And there's no doubt that social media reminds me of the Roman Forum and of a kind of mob mentality. That's the moment the mob is here, and then suddenly we've got to lynch this guy, and it rush across to that. And this destabilizing effect of social media promotes demagoguery and promotes rule outside the normal structures of power. And anarchy is the result, and anarchy always calls forth the strong man who will reimpose order. And
there's a very interesting parallel. The first volume of the Cicero trilogy is called Imperium. It came out in 2006. It all focuses on the trial of Verres. I think it's a fascinating, really a very, very necessary introduction into the role of the law courts in the late Roman Republic. We are engaged in a series of legal maneuvers in the United States now, and to a certain extent, Boris Johnson's censuring by Parliament is the same sort of public trial and public humiliation. That's sort of a precursor to everything. The rise of giantly famous and public entertainment court systems. Do you sense that that's developing as well?
I can't speak for the United States. Here, I would rather see that Parliament is struggling to contain demagoguery, lying, which Johnson seems to have done. They're trying to cling to the old rules.
Robert Harris, hang on for a second. I got to go to a break. My music is playing in my ear, which you cannot hear. Robert Harris is the author of many books, beginning with Fatherland in 1992, but the Cicero trilogy begins with Imperium. Go and get it. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about what late Roman Republic means. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. My guest is Robert Harris, author extraordinaire, joining me from Great Britain. I'm very grateful for that, Robert. I'm talking about his 3 books, Imperium from 2006, Lustrum from 2009, and 2015's. 2015 was, let me see here, Dictator. Robert, I am very curious from a technical, how much time does it take for you to learn the subject matter before you write the novel that makes the history accessible to the reader?
Well, in the case of the trilogy, I knew from the start it was going to be 3 volumes because I really just wanted to write. I mean, I was a political journalist. Politics fascinates me. I wrote a novel some people in America may have heard of or seen the movie, The Ghost, about Tony Blair, or kind of Tony Blair like prime minister and a ghostwriter on Martha's Vineyard. I've always been fascinated by politics. I wanted to write a kind of the original great political book about the struggle for power in ancient Rome. I conceived this idea and I knew it would take a long time. So the first 2 years were nothing but research. Literally, I did nothing else. I built up a research file over 500,000 words, a chronology of the 25 years I wanted to cover. And then I plotted out the books, and I started with the first one. I wanted to in media res, to use a Latin phrase. I wanted to cut in with a good story right from the beginning. And so it begins with this ambitious young senator, Marcus Tullius Cicero, who was a brilliant speaker, and he decides the best way to get on is to take down Verres, the corrupt governor of Sicily. And as you said, the first half of Imperium is taken up really with a great trial where he acts like a kind of ambitious district attorney, the kind of Theodore Roosevelt of the Roman era, I suppose.
Well, I'm fascinated. Go ahead.
No, you go.
I want to know that when you took it to your publisher, I mean, it's written for people like me who love historical fiction. What did they say when you said, I want to do 3 books about Cicero? I mean, you're just coming off this enormous bestseller of The Fatherland, and you show up and you say, I want to do 3 books on ancient Rome. What do they say to you?
Well, I had just written a novel called Pompeii, which did well. Both in Britain, it was a big bestseller here, and actually a bestseller in America as well. And so there was the publishers thought that this would be gold dust, really, I think. I mean, in the end, the books have done well in England and in Germany, and the first one certainly did pretty well in the States. But I know I'm asking a lot of the reader to follow the life and career of this guy through the law courts and through the elections. And there's a kind of what a friend of mine called toga resistance, that people don't necessarily want to read books about people who lie down to eat and wear these strange costumes and so on. All I can say is, please, if you look beyond that, you'll find everything you really need to know about power and about making speeches and the law and philosophy and warfare and intrigue. It was all done more than 2,000 years ago. And our politics, I mean, your country in particular, with a Senate and with all the courts and the elected judiciary and so on, it was the founding fathers modeled it on ancient Rome.
Absolutely. Tom Ricks has written a pretty great book fairly recently about how deeply impacted the framers were by the Roman Republic and not by the late Roman Republic's collapse. And that's why I love the Cicero trilogy too much and recommend it to everyone, beginning with Imperium. I listened to them. I encourage people on long car rides to get the audio version. Robert Harris, I want to make sure I know what you're working on next. It's like you're like Ken Follett. You never stop writing books. What's on the table right now?
Well, I've just brought out in the last year in America a book called Act of Oblivion, which is all about the English Civil War and the 2 men who signed the King Charles I death warrant, who fled to New England and were hunted across New England for more than a decade, and that is coming out in paperback in America in a couple of months. And I'm starting a novel now, just written about the first 10 pages of a novel set in Britain in 1914. And it's a kind of political intrigue novel and with espionage. So history fascinates me because I think if we, as Cicero said, people who are ignorant of the past are doomed to remain always a child, because what is the worth of a human life unless woven into the study of history by the lives of our ancestors?
Oh, so well said. I'm not going to improve on that. Sir Christopher Clark from Oxford has written a book called Sleepwalkers on that 1914 period. It's not accessible to people who won't spend 50 days reading it, but novels that do what you do serve the public so well, and I appreciate your efforts, and I encourage everyone to get Imperium. I'm going to go get Active Oblivion. I didn't know about that. I like the English Civil War. Thank you for joining me this morning, Robert Harris. Come back another time, and I encourage everyone, spend your summer with Robert Harris, and you will be better off for it. Start with Imperium, move on to Lustrum and to Conspiracy. Thank you so much for being with me. Thank you, America, for listening. Late Roman Republic indeed. Hunter Biden, Donald Trump in the dock. It's all very familiar to anyone who reads and listens to the people who recount for you what it was 22,000 years ago. Everything comes back around again. Hopefully we dodge that bullet. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Ben. I'll be back and forth to D.C. by the time I talk to you tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.